What is going on, guys? It's Everett here, and in this video we're going to talk about the pigeon pose and really focus in on getting the most benefit out of that position. Now, if you've watched any of my other videos or you've subscribed to the channel, which you should do, I talk a lot about mobility like strength and conditioning. You need to train your mobility. You need to know where you're starting at, what the progress or the plan is, and to what specific goal for you. So a lot of people just hop into pigeon pose and think, hey, it's just gonna fix my hips or my back because it's a stretch. And that's not always the case. And for some people, it could actually cause more problems by cheating or compensating your position to get further into the stretch just for the sake of stretching. So what we're going to do in this video is try to figure out how much external rotation you have at your hip, because that's what we're using the pigeon pose for. External rotation is vital for healthy hips just in general, but as someone who squats and deadlifts a lot, it's very important for squatting, even if you have a more narrow squat. And surprisingly for most people, it helps out your deadlift a lot. I find my clients who have excessively tight hamstrings, one, either their hips are pretty weak as well, but also they're not able to rotate at their hips, which puts more strain on their hamstrings. So once we get them more external rotation, they can get into a better position and they feel less tension on their hamstrings. So your external rotators include muscles like your glute med, glute min, and piriformis. So we might actually need to regress the pigeon pose and not do it on the ground. And then we're gonna go through some very specific cues to help you as an individual find the lines of tension that you need to stretch within. And then we're going to focus on isometrics, and the concept of the isometrics will be from the lens of the FRS system, which is the mobility certifications I have. So we're going to do isometrics to not only increase our range of motion, our flexibility, but also teach your body how to use that flexibility. So when we go squat really heavy or do a sumo deadlift, our muscles are already used to contracting and being strong in that new position, which carries over to fitness. All right, so let's hop into the stretch. We'll go through the technique, we'll go through some compensations to watch out for, and we'll try to get more flexible and more controlled. So we'll kick all this off with our external rotation test. Now this is going to be very imperfect, but it'll give us a general idea. This is best done by someone else, so that way you can really relax and see what your true external rotation is. And of course, it's best done by someone who knows the amount of range of motion that you should have and how your hip works itself. So you can see right here, I've got a jump stretch band or an exercise band. You can use anything, literally rope, a belt. What we're going to do is lie down, and you're going to put your thumbs on your hip bone, your ASIS, and then you're going to pull and bend your hip and your knee to about 90 degrees of the hip and 90 degrees at the knee. Now you want to make sure you're not shifting your hips around or your back isn't starting to round into flexion or into extension. So from here, you're going to pull your foot towards your chest, so you're rotating your hip externally. Again, you're trying to keep the 90-degree bend. You might have to do this several times to really make sure you're not compensating with your back or your pelvis and you're actually rotating at just your hip. Do this on both sides and you'll get better as you go. Again, it might take a couple tries, but once again, you saw right there my right hip shot off the ground. I'm just shifting my hips around and I'm cheating to get more range of motion. The way I visualize this is like my leg is a tire iron. So you've got a tire iron that's got a 90-degree bend in it, so you can get leverage to take your wheel off of your car if you get a flat tire. So imagine my hip is the bolt on my car wheel and my leg is the tire iron. So I just want to rotate right at my hip. I don't want to lean or shift or compensate at my low back or my hips. And again, this is important because if we can barely go into external rotation, we'll know that we have to have a very regressed pigeon pose position. However, if we have decent external rotation, we can then progress to doing this on the ground. And in fact, we might just want to start training our end range mobility instead of excessively stretching because we have adequate range of motion. All right, guys, so moving into the actual stretching position. So as you can see, I've got a bench here. This is a modified or regressed pigeon pose. So again, unless you have this much external rotation, 90 degrees, Doing this on the ground means you're probably cheating or compensating in some way. You're rounding your low back, you're shifting your pelvis. And the great thing about this is, which we haven't really even talked about, is we're taking the back leg out of the equation. We're just deleting the back leg, the flexibility requirements there. Because in the pigeon pose, you're essentially doing a front split with that back leg, which is pretty crazy. So not only do you probably not have 90 degrees of external rotation, you probably don't have the front splits down either. So the even more regressed version of this would be standing. So that way I can actually modify my height of my torso with my hip and my back knee, okay? So for some people, if you don't have opportunity to stand, maybe don't have like a massage therapy table like I'm showing you right now, you can put books or something underneath this back knee. Just be aware you're gonna need some cushioning for that back kneecap. So on to our compensations, because like you saw in my external rotation test, I don't have this much external rotation. So what am I doing right now to make this look like I have it? Well, first thing, we check the back. Is everything facing forward? Are the hips facing forward? And is the back rounding excessively? In my case, it's not. So now we're gonna look at the hip itself. So it's not wrong to do this with a less than 90-degree bend. Again, it's just depending on what your goals are for this position, but that's typically a compensation. So what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna shimmy my body to my left and open up this leg to about 90 degrees. And right when I do that, you can see I start to get a little bit of space, right? Which means I'm at less than 90 degrees in my external rotation. So we can already see I was cheating a little bit. I also quickly check my foot. This isn't a big deal, but I do try to have the foot facing the wall as if I was standing on it. So I don't want to be in a lot of inversion or eversion of the ankle, just like so. And I don't want pointed toes. I want those toes pulled up, all right? And then finally, the hip will start to punch forward towards this front leg, and I can see more of my hamstring, which means I'm losing external rotation. So I'm going to try to externally rotate my leg. So this is my left leg, rotate it clockwise, and that's going to hide my hamstring from my eyesight. And as soon as I do that, my leg picks up even more, and you'll notice your hip, left hip, shoots out to the left laterally. If I was doing this with my right leg, my right hip would be shooting out more. And right there, and you're gonna feel this, oh man, side of the hip, side of the glutes, the outside of the hamstring, like crazy. Now this position, at this point, I feel like I'm almost holding myself here, and I wanna relax. So I'm gonna grab a yoga block. You could use a couple pillows or something, or rolled up towels, and I'm gonna just brace my knee so that way I can actually relax. Now from here, I'm gonna take a big breath in my stomach and just lean forward and increase that stretch a little bit. All right, so whenever I'm stretching, again, I power lift, so I'm thinking, could I hold a barbell on my back in this position? And my spine is nice and neutral, my hips are even. I can take a deep diaphragmatic breath in my stomach, and I'm like, yeah. So this is the position I would be in, kind of, when I'm squatting or deadlifting, which means I wanna stretch here. So now I'm gonna do a 2-minute stretch, and it shouldn't feel too crazy at first. If it feels like a crazy extreme stretch in 30 seconds, I'm not gonna be able to hold a full 2 minutes here, and that's our goal, 2 minutes per side. So if about a minute, it's feeling all right, then I can again, with a tall back, lean forward more. Once again, I can just collapse like this and look really great, like I'm super flexible, but I can't deadlift like this, okay? So I don't wanna be here. So I wanna keep everything in the right position. So now, as we talked about, we wanna learn how to actually use our muscles within the new flexibility we have, because this isn't typically where we contract our muscles. So it might not be safe to just load up and be like, wow, I feel great, let's PR my back squat right now. So we need to train our tissues and our nervous system to be in this position, and this is where isometrics come into play. So there's different ideas on how to use isometrics. The FRS system, we call these pails and rails, and we want to train both the tissues that are getting long and stretched out and the tissues that are shorter. Now this gets technical, just like deadlifting looks pretty easy. Oh, you just bend over and pick up the barbell. It gets very difficult, especially as you try to perform at higher and higher levels. This gets tricky. So if you don't really know what you're doing, or you really want to increase your mobility, find an FRC, find an FRA, an FR practitioner in your area and do some sessions with them. It will pay off a lot, I promise you. So in this position, once again, we're gonna find the end range, make sure we're not cheating or compensating. And I'm gonna use my outside glute muscles, my hamstring, and I'm gonna push my knee and my ankle into the bench, just like 10%. So I'm imagining I'm squatting, I'm warming up, I'm using like 100 pounds to warm up. Then I'm gonna squeeze harder and go to 20%. Couple seconds, squeeze harder to 30%. So you can squeeze as much as you possibly can, like you're PRing your back squat and your knees are starting to come in, they're starting to collapse and you're really fighting to drive and keep them out. That's what I'm doing here. I'm using my glute muscles. Don't go to 100% though, because you're gonna get really sore. And again, if this is the first time you're doing this, it might just be too much for you. So go to about, say, 50% of your maximum effort. So we go 10%, 20, 30, 40, 50%. We should be using all of our muscles, gripping the bench, getting some air in the stomach, keeping our abs nice and tight, and holding that 50% effort straight down into the bench for 10 seconds, all right? Just like we would squatting, we're gripping the bar really hard, we're trying to break it over our back, our abs are tight, our feet are dug into the ground. Nothing different. I hold that for 10 seconds, that contraction, I relax and exhale, I don't move my position, and then without cheating, I'm probably gonna feel like I have a little more flexibility. I can lean forward with a tall spine. And now I'm gonna do the exact opposite thing. I'm gonna try to use the opposite muscles, these inside, these adductors, these internal rotators, to try to pull the knee and the ankle off of the bench. Or you can imagine it in another perspective, like I'm trying to use these leg muscles to pull my torso, my belly button towards this leg, okay? And I'm gonna do the same process. 10% effort, just find the muscles, learn how to contract them. 20, 30, 40, 50%. Hold for 10 seconds, exhale, relax, and then go into the stretch a little bit more, and then switch sides. All right, guys, so a couple important things before we end this video. So first off, obviously, that's how I train for myself and my clients for better external rotation. And depending on your lifting style and how much you sit and other factors, you can lose the rotational capacity at your hips fairly quickly and to a large degree over time. So you really need to take care of this. After that, I mentioned it, you don't want to do a whole lot of this before you work out. You do not want to greatly expand your range of motion. And just because you feel better, which you will from doing this type of training, then go try to PR your back squat. It's brand new range of motion. That could be a recipe for disaster. So on your off days and off seasons, and how much time you spend on that is up to your own situation and your own goals. Now beyond that, like I said, this is training. So you don't just do this once and it fixes it. You don't squat once and then be like, cool, I got squatting, I'm good to go. You have to train it progressively. Now, don't be disheartened. That doesn't mean you have to spend 8 hours a day doing this type of isometrics and stretching. Really, once to twice a week for 30 days, you'll see great results. Again, that's not a guarantee. I don't know who you are. You might have to do more. You might have to do less. It might be for longer, all right? It's really up to you. But I promise this stretch and these isometrics do help a lot and carry over to lifting. And finally, if you like this style of training, the very specific cues, being very intentful with the stretching position, and then adding in isometrics to actually be stronger and use that position, especially in powerlifting, but other things as well, check out my full hip mobility course. It's 16 videos long, 2.5 hours of content. It's on my website, link in the description. Only 29 bucks, and it helps the channel out a lot. So thanks for watching. Hit the like button, subscribe please, and see you in the next video.